Hello YouTube, I'm back again, and in this video I'm going to be writing a task 1. You can write alongside me. In the previous 2 videos I showed you how to plan the essay and also how to structure your sentences. Hopefully you'll learn something as I do this. I'll speak out loud so you can see my thought process, and then we'll just go from there. So if we do this task 1 here, the line graph, which is the same one we planned previously. If you haven't watched that video, go watch that first and then come back to this one. So let's just get into it. So we're going to start with paraphrasing the title here. Very often when you do this, you can just copy the information along the side and the bottom, and that will paraphrase the way that it's already been done. So you don't have to give it too much thought. So we've got a line graph here, so say the line graph, illustrate, you can put shows, depict, whatever verb you like here. What is it illustrating? So changes, how many changes? We have 4 categories, so in 4 sources of income for a bank, and then what are the years between 2012 and 2022. And then we also want to look at what kind, like how are they measuring this? So this is being measured in dollars, but not any dollars, it is millions of dollars, right? So measured in millions of dollars. Where I've put in 4 sources of income here, if you want to, in brackets, list them out, you can, but I don't think it's super necessary. So as you can see, I've literally just taken the information that's on the line graph, and you can just put this in your title. It will always be paraphrased for how the title is actually given to you. Okay, first sentence, least important sentence of the whole essay, by the way, so please don't spend too much time on it. Now we get into the important part. We want to give our overview. So what is the general trend that's happening? So as we planned this last time, we put the red and blue lines together, rates, revenue, and user charges. So we're going to write that in our overview in the same way. So what did these do? They steadily rose throughout the period. So let's just do that. So overall, rates, revenue, and user charges rose steadily throughout the period. You don't really want to put the exact numbers or the years here. You're going to save that for your main body. That's what separates your overview to your main bodies, is these details. Okay, now we want to use a linking word. Obviously we're going to use some kind of contrasting linking word, because the other 2 categories are doing something that's very different from these 2 categories, right? So we'll just go down the list. So we'll go with whereas borrowings. What's borrowings doing? So it's like up and down, up and down, up and down, right? So we just say borrowings fluctuated. And what's grants and subsidies doing? Grants and subsidies, so it like peaked and then dropped, or we don't have to use too fancy vocabulary, so we can just say that it, increased before briefly declining. So let's go grants and subsidies increased briefly before decreasing. Let's go with declining. Okay. If I do make any spelling mistakes, please point it out. I might overlook it. Alright, so that's the introduction done. It shouldn't take you very long. As I mentioned, we planned this already, and we're just giving you a very general picture of what happened. I'll try to write this essay to round about band 7.5, 8-ish. Just because there's no point really, in my opinion, at looking at band 8.5 or 9 model answers if you're trying to get a band 7 on your IELTS test. Because if you're at a band 6 and you're moving up to a band 7, looking at that step from 6 to 7 is much more digestible or easier to understand than jumping from like 6 to a 9. And nobody really needs a band 9 anyway. Most of you are trying to get 6.5 or 7 for university or immigration, right? So it's just not necessary. Anyway, off topic. Okay, now we get to the juicy part. We're going to write these sentences. If you didn't see the last video, these 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 5, should be 6, 7, 8. These are our points we are going to write about. So sentence number 3, 4, and 5 is for the first main body, rates and revenue compared to user charges. And then the second main body is borrowings and grants and subsidies. Remember, the first paragraph is similarities, and then the second paragraph, these are differences, if possible. So let's get into it. I think we wrote 3 already, but we can write it again. So let's start with initially, so we want the data in there from 2012 to 2015. What did they do? So they both rose, but at different rates, right? So that's exactly how we want to write our statement. So we'll say both rates, revenue, and user charges grew, albeit, let's go for albeit, at different rates. Okay, so we've got our statement. Just to give you a quick recap of last lesson, every sentence needs to have 3 parts to it. Subordinate clause, aka linking word, statement describing the change that is happening, and then data. This is going to be your years and your numbers, in this case millions of dollars. So let's describe them. So we'll go with rates revenue first. Rates revenue, okay, so compared to user charges, this rose very insignificantly. So let's go with marginally. Rates right from around, if you want to use approximately, roughly, it doesn't really matter which word you use here to describe it. So this looks like around $1.4 billion, right? 1.4 billion, don't want the capital B here, to 1.6 billion. Again, another linking word. So this is happening at the same time. We're talking about user charges doing the same thing as rates revenue. So we can say, meanwhile, let's just go with while, keep it simple. While user charges. Now this is where the comparison comes into play, right? So we mentioned earlier that they grew at different rates. We mentioned this first one was, rising very slowly, marginally, and this one is definitely more significant. So we can say increased more significantly, more substantially. Let's go substantially. And then we just want to put the numbers, the data in again. Climbing from, yeah, it's exactly 1 billion, right? From 1 billion to, how much is this line here? 1.3? 1.35? Let's go roughly 1.3. Okay, done. To be honest, when you're using these words like roughly, around, about, approximately, doesn't really matter too much if you are super close, right? So like if you put 1.35 here, or 1.3 or 1.4, it's going to make absolutely zero difference to your score, because it's quite difficult to tell what exactly the exact number is here. Okay, let's scroll this over a little bit. And now we're just going to follow that exact same process throughout. Subordinate clause, statement, data, but for 4 and for 5. If you wanted to write 4 and 5 together, you probably could because of how similar they are, but for the sake of following the structure, we're just going to write them separately. Okay, so we want to use linking word. So what happened next? So then, after that, thereafter, we want to put our time frame again between 2015 and 2018. Now what's happening? As I mentioned earlier, the same thing is happening, so we want to put our statement saying this as well. So this upward trend carried on, continued. Let's go with continued. Rates revenue. And now we want to put our data. So rates revenue reached approximately 1.7. 1.7 billion. Okay. And what's user charges doing? So they rose to 1.6. On second thought, I think this is closer to 1.8, right? Because if we're going to put 1.6 here, this can't be 1.7. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, okay. Let me zoom out a bit, put this back. Technical issue. Alright, I'm back to 1.6 billion. And it's as simple as that, right? Subordinate clause, statement, data. Now this might seem a little robotic or repetitive. And as I mentioned in the planning essay, is this the 100% best way to write about this data? No, definitely not. You could select better trends if you had more than 20 minutes, but you only have 20 minutes to write this whole essay. So you want to use a reliable system that's going to enable you to plan as quickly as possible so you can focus on the quality of your writing. So it's the easiest way to achieve what you want, where you can focus on your quality. Okay, so point 4 done. Point 5, again, is much of the same. So we want to use another linking word. You can use another time linking word, such as subsequently. I'm going to go with moreover, because the trend is going up and still going up and up and up. Moreover, put the years again. And again, if I were writing band 8.5 or 9, I would use a different approach, but as I mentioned, most people are not looking to get this band, so I'm showing you how to do it to roughly about a 7.5. Okay, let's see. So we've already mentioned that they increased in an upward trend. So we want to say that this continued, but we can't really use the same language. So let's think of a different way. So let's say the two income sources rose, we always rose, right? Increased in, let's go with parallel. When two lines are exactly the same, but we're saying upwards, increased in parallel as rates revenue climbed to about 2.4 million? Yeah, 2.4 billion, sorry, not million, 2.4 billion, and user charges reached 2 billion. Okay, first main body done. Definitely the easier of the two main bodies because they're following a very similar fashion. So this comparative paragraph here was really describing about how two pieces of data are doing the same thing throughout. So now we're going to do a contrasting paragraph. So let's start with by contrast, and we can just explain the same time period. The reason why we want to use the same time period is we're following a logical structure here. We started from the beginning, we explained two pieces of data in three logical orders, beginning, middle, and end, and now we're going to compare the same pieces of data over the same time period. So it is, again, in a logical order that makes sense, rather than just jumping all over the place, like from the highest point to the lowest point, which is a bit illogical. So it's keep it logical, keep it structured. So we've got borrowings and grants. I'm going to use this and symbol because I don't want to use and. So like borrowings and grants and subsidies, it sounds a little repetitive. So we want to make our statement, right? So our previous statement was that they grew in similar fashion, and now we're making a comparative statement. So let's say they followed a more unusual, irregular, let's go with irregular patterns over the same period. Okay, so let's start with borrowings. Borrowings rose to just just over 1.1 billion. We'll go with 1.1 billion before declining. And what is grants and subsidies doing here? While grants and subsidies marginally rose. How would we describe this? Modestly? It's very... Did we use marginally earlier? I think we did. Alright, let's go with moderate. Oh, beautiful spelling here, by the way. Hang on, let me go back and change that. Increased moderately. Modestly. Okay. Increased modestly from around 400 million. And remember, we've put the same time period here. So we know we're from 2012 to 2015, but we probably want to state that clearly. So it's obvious for the examiner which time period we mean. And this ended at 500 million between 2012 and 2015. Done. So just to quickly highlight the points, right? So we've got linking words here, here, statements here, and statements here. And then the rest is just data. Okay. Let's go over the next part. Oh, wow. This looks a bit tricky, right? But luckily we've broken it down into 3 periods, so it should be easier to follow. So let's start with the time period over the next 3 years. Borrowings fell to... How low did they fall? 600? Yes, to approximately 600 million. And then after it fell, what did it do? Is this 600? Hang on. Yeah, it's about 600. So before rising back up to 800 million in 2018. Okay, and then we just want to say what so whereas grants and subsidies. Now, this is quite an important point for subsidies because this is the highest point that it does reach, and it's the only time that it overtakes borrowings. Now, if you want to include both of those in there, you can. Up towards a band 7.5, I think it's fine just putting in brackets that this was its peak. So whereas grants and subsidies peaked at 750 million before declining back downwards to roughly 650 million in 2018. Okay, final sentence. We're almost there. I know it might seem a little repetitive, but we're just following the structure to be able to get it done in 20 minutes. So same process again. Luckily, there's not too much going on with grants and subsidies at the end. So let's use a linking word to show that we're at the end. So let's go with finally. Between, you can say for the last 4 years, but I'll just write it out here, between 2018 and 2022, borrowings. Oh, quick side note, you guys don't need to worry about paraphrasing data. So you definitely want to paraphrase the language that you're using to describe the data, 100%. But paraphrasing like borrowings, user charges, rates revenue, and grants and subsidies, absolutely not necessary. And very often this would be actually quite detrimental to your score, because if you paraphrase it incorrectly, there's just some data sets which can't really be paraphrased effectively. You're actually writing about something else. So the actual data word and like the years and things like that, you don't need to paraphrase them because they are as they are. Just a side note, as I know some people do worry about that. Okay, so between 2018 borrowings, it went up and down. We could say fluctuated here. We could also say peaked or reached its highest point. Let's go with that because we used peaked earlier. Reached its highest point at about 1.4 billion before rapidly dropping and remaining constant at, I'm going to say this is 700 million. Comma, while grants and subsidies what's grants and subsidies doing? Just decline steadily, right? We've used declined a few times. Let's go with decreased steadily to roughly 500 million by the end of the period. And that's it. Done. Hopefully writing this out whilst thinking out loud to you guys has provided some value. Just a couple of side notes before you take this as like, this is perfect writing. you can definitely mix the structure around. So in this structure, I've pretty much for every single sentence gone and started with a linking word, then put the data, usually the years, then the statement, and then the numbers. This can change, right? So you can absolutely go with linking word, statement, years, numbers, or you can go linking word, numbers, years, statement. This order can be mixed around, and for higher levels of writing, definitely should. But I just wanted to clearly illustrate that you can use a pretty simple structure to write up to a band 7.5, and you don't have to get too complicated and too fancy, just to show you how it can be done in 20 minutes. If you do have any questions or queries, please leave me a comment. I'm more than happy to help, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful day.